Welcome to the Never Too Early Fantasy Football Podcast, where it is never too early for fantasy football. My name is Jeff.
And I'm Alex.
As always, thank you for downloading, listening, liking, and commenting on our podcast videos. Please join our community by subscribing to us on the socials. Our handle on all platforms is at N2E Fantasy. We are also available on all major podcasting apps by searching N2E Fantasy. Alex, what do we have on today's show?
On this episode of the Never Too Early Fantasy Football Podcast, we are recapping all Week 7 action. But first, we have a lot of little bits of news here today. So why don't we get kickstarted with the bad news first? 49ers have lost Brandon Ayuk to a torn ACL and MCL. So another case of a guy that holds out a little bit to get his contract and then comes back and gets an injury at some point. He wasn't effective for most of the season thus far, and now he's out for the rest of the year, Jeff. So what do you make of this situation?
So 2 points on this. He was becoming more and more effective as the season was going on. So that's one thing. And number two, he's probably pretty darn glad that he signed that contract now, because if he was entering free agency and tore his ACL just like this, then he would have been not gotten as lucrative of a deal. So he did the best for himself by waiting for that contract.
Yeah, he probably made $50 million by going ahead and taking the money rather than bet on himself this year and then get the ACL tear. He wouldn't have got anywhere close to that.
Exactly. So this is why players hold out. This is why they ask to get paid, because from year to year, you're putting your body on the line and you don't know if it could be it.
Well, I mean, it's good that they are getting Ricky Pearsall back and Deebo Samuel coming back from pneumonia, and probably Juan Jennings pretty soon as well. I think Kittle just went down with a hurt foot, but he shouldn't be out that long, I wouldn't think.
I would hope not. But unfortunately, he wasn't the only wide receiver that was lost this week. Buccaneers lose wide receiver Chris Godwin to a dislocated ankle. They also are going to be without wide receiver Mike Evans for a stretch of about 4 weeks with a hamstring injury. But Chris Godwin's season is over, and his time with the Bucs could be over as well if they don't make the playoffs, because there is a small chance of him making it back for the playoffs.
Yeah, I don't know how bad the dislocation is, because sometimes there's structural damage. It's also, where you put at least half of your weight, or whenever you're stepping, you put a significant part of your weight. So that's a very sensitive injury to come back from. And even when you do come back, you probably have to have it wrapped. So he may not be as effective. He's someone I'm probably avoiding next year too at this point, which is sad because he was having probably a career year before he got hurt.
Absolutely. And then some smaller wide receiver injuries. We have the Dolphins losing wide receiver Braxton Berrios to a torn ACL. I know you're rolling your eyes at me because we had to mention Braxton Berrios here, but you went out of your way to send it to me, so I thought it was important to add into this podcast.
I know he's one of your favorite Dolphins wide receivers, and it's unfortunate that anyone gets hurt. I don't like to see anyone get hurt, but I thought you'd want to know since you like to keep tabs on Braxton Berrios.
Oh, I do. Every step of the way here. Wide receivers got dinged up this week, but also quarterbacks got dinged up this week, and the Browns lose quarterback Deshaun Watson to a torn Achilles, which you could visibly see on video, and it was kind of crazy. So I'll let you break down what this means for the Browns going forward, but this was a pretty big loss for the Browns, in my opinion.
It's going to be tough for them because either way, the next 2 seasons, he has a $72 million cap hit. So the rest of the year, they're probably rolling with Winston. I know that they brought in Bailey Zappi as well. So I would trust those two over Dorian Thompson-Robinson or whatever, Roberts, DTR. Whatever. I think DTR is more of a gadget kind of quarterback and probably transitions to wide receiver at some point. But Winston's the best option they have available. Zappi would be next. I think that there might be a slight bump in production for the wide receivers, but there might be a drop off in accuracy. So it's going to offset a little bit. But I don't know what the Cleveland can really do. They need to hope that Watson comes back healthy, and someone's foolish enough to trade for him at some point, either next year or in 2026, because that's the only way that they're going to not have to pay him everything. But
exactly,
they're in a rough spot here.
Exactly. So we'll see what happens there. But more sombering news here for you. Raiders lose quarterback Aiden O'Connell to a broken thumb for at least the next 4 weeks. He did go on IR, so he has to miss the next 4 games. But the Raiders also snagged quarterback Desmond Ridder off the Cardinals practice squad as well. So he is now on the active roster. And we didn't mention before, but the Browns snagged Bailey Zappi from the Chiefs practice squad. So some old quarterback names making their presence felt around week 7 or 8 in the season so far. So
Yeah. Aiden O'Connell, to me, was the best quarterback on the Raiders, which isn't saying much comparatively, but you hate to lose your starting quarterback and then put in Gardner Minshew, who turns the ball over 3 times. There's an interview clip with Antonio Pierce, and they ask him about how do you limit Gardner Minshew's turnovers, and he did not look happy. So this is a team that probably is drafting a quarterback next year.
yeah, and they definitely should. They should have last year, and they didn't. So they should have. But yeah, we'll see if
Didn't
they
they
make
pick
that change.
Didn't they pick 13th or something, and they had 6 quarterbacks taken in front of them?
Yeah, absolutely. But there's other quarterbacks, not just first round guys.
Okay. Then I don't think the other guys aren't a guarantee, especially the further down you go. It's less likely that they're successful. But
you're talking to a guy that teams drafted Bryce Young, so I don't want to hear about guarantees at high picks for quarterbacks.
okay. All right.
Hey,
So
we can hop to this one is your favorite here. The Saints signing wide receiver Marquez Valdez-Scantling. The MVS is back in the NFL. And I know you're pumped about that, but that does seem like a good Raheed Shaheed replacement.
well, it's a budget version for sure. There's not much available for free out there, and they signed him off the street, whereas they'd have to trade up significant assets to get another wide receiver. And I don't think that they would do it at this point with the record that they have. I think that their future assets are probably pretty important, and they showed that by extending Alvin Kamara's contract 2 years and adding $24 more million to it. So, what do you make of those 2 moves, Jeff?
Yeah, well, it does cut down the cap hit for Kamara in 2025, which is interesting. The Saints are right back to their kicking the can down the sidewalk strategy. But Kamara has been one of the best running backs in football this year, so this makes a lot of sense for me. You probably wanted him traded, right?
It would have made more sense to trade him, in my opinion. And I think he might have wanted that himself, but maybe he loves living in New Orleans and Saints love burning their cap. So we'll see how they survive next offseason, how they can get it back down again with some wizardry. But I'm more disappointed that Lions budding star wide receiver Jameson Williams just got suspended for 2 games off of a PED suspension. So it's a guy who started off his career coming off of a college injury, and I think he got suspended for off the field stuff and was finally starting to look good, then got 2 game suspension when they need him so that they can continue atop of the NFC North. So now they have to stay ahead of the Packers and the Vikings both, and potentially even the Bears. All 4 of those teams are doing really well at this point in the season. All have winning records, which is the first time ever for the NFC North at this stage in the season.
I think it was any division, right?
I think so too, yeah.
So that's pretty cool in its own right. But how many more mistakes do you give Jameson Williams to make with these suspensions before they realize it's time to move off of him? Because every time he gets momentum, he kind of cuts out his own knees.
I mean, I think it's fine right now, but if he does it again next year, then you start thinking about moving on from him. But I think what he brings to the table for the Lions, they don't have another receiver that can do that.
No, I completely agree, and we'll see if they go out and snag someone like, hey, the Rams are shopping Cooper Kupp, so would you like to see a wide receiver like Cooper Kupp go to the Lions? Reportedly, they want a second-round pick for him, and they're willing to keep some of his salary. But, Alex, where do you think's a good spot for Cooper Kupp?
Well, I don't think the Lions are the best spot for him because he would overlap with Amon-Ra St. Brown too much. I think that the Lions should be targeting an edge rusher, so either Myles Garrett from Cleveland or maybe Max Crosby, even though the Raiders owner has kind of shot down any trade talks for that. But as far as Cooper Kupp, everyone's favorite spot seems to be Kansas City. I can't really imagine that because they already have Travis Kelce. They kind of need another speedster out there to replace the two that they've lost, seemingly. But where do you think Cooper Kupp can go, Jeff?
So my ideal spot is to keep him on the Rams for a couple more weeks because they're going to be getting Puka Nacua back, which they just opened the 21-day practice window for Puka Nacua, and they're a game and a half back in the division, and this feels like a white flag moment, and I don't like it at all. But if he had to go somewhere, I would ship him to an AFC team. I doubt there's going to be a ton of teams willing to help the Chiefs right now with the repeat because that's like a big NFL deal. But teams like the Chargers or the Broncos, teams that need wide receivers and don't have them. Could Jacksonville swap Gabe Davis for Cooper Kupp? That would be ideal move for them. But I don't
no one would do that deal.
happening.
But with the Chargers and the Broncos, not only do they need an improvement at wide receiver, but they would also be blocking the Chiefs from getting Cooper Kupp, which would also be a good move in its own right. So those are all good spots. I just don't think that it makes sense to trade him to Jacksonville at this stage. And I think Cooper Kupp probably wants to go somewhere where he can win this year.
Yeah. I wonder how much that'll be factored into it, and I wonder how much they actually like him and will listen to where he wants to go. So that'll all be interesting intricacies of this trade.
What about going to Atlanta? You play with Kirk Cousins, and the Rams defensive coordinator is now the Falcons head coach, and they have the former, I think, passing game coordinator from the Rams is now the offensive coordinator for the Falcons this year. So that would be an interesting place and would be further enough away, I would think.
Yeah, I think the most impactful spot, though, is Detroit because he'll be reunited with Jared Goff, and I think there'll be a lot less of a learning curve there. But I think no matter where he goes, very early on, there's going to be a learning curve. I know we saw it this week with Amari Cooper, and he lucked into a touchdown. So there's going to be some fantasy weeks that stink because he's trying to learn the playbook, trying to learn chemistry, all that stuff that you would ideally have done in the preseason.
All right. Some pseudo-positive news here. Dolphins activated quarterback Tua Tagovailoa. I can't ever say his last name.
Tagovailoa. Okay, I know it's not spelled that way, but it's pronounced that way. Tagovailoa.
Sure. Whatever you say, Jeff. Anyway, they activated his 21-day window. He may come back as soon as this week if he passes concussion protocols. Very questionable to come back now. I know they desperately need him. He seems stubbornly intent on playing, which is his choice. He's also intent on not wearing a Guardian cap, which we don't yet have significant statistical proof that it's more effective than other helmets right now, even though it seems like it should because it's soft on the outside, which means it absorbs hits, theoretically. I don't know what to make of this. I feel like he's just going to get another concussion and it's just going to get worse. Jeff, what do you think?
So I'm excited for him to come back. I don't think he's going to make another mistake like he did last time. And prior to that, he's over 2 years away from his previous concussion. So it seemed like he had a formula that was working and he made a boneheaded move in a game.
Literally.
And he regretted it. Yeah. And I think that they've said that the Guardian caps aren't any more safe than the actual helmets. But again, you're right. We don't have the statistics on that yet. But they're cool looking, I guess. So
no, they're not cool looking. And the only reason you'd ever wear that is so you don't get your brain turned to mush.
Absolutely. But it'll factor into my picks in our next episode with Tua coming back. But I think we have something else to go over first, Alex.
What's that, Jeff?
We have our Week 7 recap where we had the Bears and the Cowboys on a bye. And then we kicked off the week with the Sean Payton revenge game, Broncos at the Saints. Alex, how was this game here?
This game was a slaughter. The Broncos demolished the depleted New Orleans Saints 33-10. It's worth noting that the Saints are playing with their backup quarterback, playing without virtually all of their starting wide receivers. They were without their Swiss Army knife, Taysom Hill. Their defense was banged up. So not a lot was going right for the Saints in this one. Broncos got their left tackle back, and they also were missing Patrick Surtain, which didn't seem to matter that much in this matchup. But Broncos look like they can be a middle of the pack team, potentially be on the edge of making the playoffs at this point. It's very interesting. Javonte Williams had his best game of the season. Troy Franklin looks like he's improving and growing and maybe can be a wide receiver too to Cortland Sutton. So we'll see how that pans out. But Jeff, are you ready to accept your quarterback Bo Nix going forward?
So the Saints were very beat up in this particular game. This was also a Sean Payton revenge game. The Saints basically only had Kamara left on their starting offense and not much else. So that's a bit of a problem. But yeah, like this is the games that the Broncos, if they want to be a good team, not a great team, not an elite team, but if they want to be a good team, this is the game that they should dominate, and they did. So maybe they are on their way to being a good team.
Yeah, I think the Broncos and Chargers are in a similar spot talent-wise. I think both of those teams are borderline playoffs, but not quite ready. This is very encouraging for the Denver Broncos. The Saints can still potentially make the playoffs as well, although that division seems to have gotten tougher.
And weaker.
They just need everyone healthy.
Absolutely, but the Buccaneers just lost Evans and Godwin as we just went over. So
who
are they throwing the ball to?
For the Saints?
Yeah, exactly. And then obviously we're going to get to the Falcons a little bit later, but they're going to have to turn it around really quickly. But Kamara was the only one left standing, and he's the only one that got rewarded with a new contract this week.
It's true. I feel like Kamara is most of their offense anyway.
Yeah, I think that's why they extended him versus trading him too, because they realized that they'd be unwatchable without him.
I think they watched the Saquon Barkley saga play out with New York and him leaving, going to Philly, and I don't think they want that to happen with Kamara yet.
And I don't think Kendra Miller's it either. He had a couple drops in his first game action of the year. So, all right. Anything else on this game before we go to London?
Oh, just we both picked it and we both got it right.
All right. So speaking of picks, this game here, Alex, I got right and you got wrong. The Jags win. So that's a big deal here. So we had the Patriots losing to the Jaguars. It looked like Thomas, Bigsby, Ingram, and Lawrence seem to have something figured out against the Patriots team. Drake May throws for 276 yards. And you know how I talk about those flashes of rookie quarterbacks? This is one of those flashes that I'm talking about. Even in a tough loss, he's still showing that he isn't the reason why they're losing. So that's a big deal this early on in a rookie quarterback's career. And yeah, we'll see if the Jaguars can build on that.
Yeah. So for about 20 minutes, I was about to start texting Jeff and trash talking him because the Patriots were up 10-0 in the first quarter and the beginning of the second quarter, but didn't say anything because I had a feeling that Jacksonville would at least even it up, make it more difficult. And Jacksonville pretty much almost shut them out the rest of the game and really dominated, especially the second quarter. But like you said, Drake May did have a lot of good flashes. There were a lot of plays also that made him look like a rookie, and was kind of frustrating to watch, just not seeing some guys not knowing when to step up in the pocket versus when to roll out. Kind of seemed like he ran straight into defenders a couple times. Wasn't helped out by his wide receiver group there. Holt just drops left and right. Can't catch a contested catch to save the team. Very frustrating, but Hunter Henry is looking like a tight end one in this league, especially with Drake May. Ramondre Stevenson wasn't that healthy. I could clearly see it that he didn't have the same burst. But Tank Bigsby looks like the running back I thought he was going to be last year. It just took a year for it to kick in. I'm not sure if he'll steal the starting job from Etienne when Etienne's healthy, but he's certainly going to force them to play both of them. So that'll be interesting going forward. Brian Thomas looked like the best player on the field outside of the quarterback position, and I wish that they would feed him more. But Ingram looked really good as a possession guy, so I think those two will be the top two pass catchers going forward.
Yeah, that's awesome, though, because the Jags have some pieces here that they could really build on, but we'll see if they do it.
The Jags have a brutal schedule coming up the next 5 or 6 weeks, so I wouldn't count on it.
We will see. We will see. But also in that game, it seems like Gabe Davis has taken a back seat with the Jaguars, which he should be. And it appears Christian Kirk is still involved some way. shape or form in the game, but it does seem like they're going away from him a little bit more as well. But Gerard Mayo called out the Patriots after this game, called them soft, which Coach Bill Belichick disagreed with. That's the right strategy with the team. So interesting that the new coach is doing that and the old coach is saying that he shouldn't have done that. So we will see.
Well, we'll see if Mayo can turn around his coaching trajectory, because he may get fired before the year is up. I don't know.
Yeah, he's already got a quarterback, though. So, I mean, that's half the battle. So once you have one, that's a good sign. So maybe he gets a reprieve based on that. All right. Anything else on this game before we go to our 1 p.m. games?
Nope. Let's move on to division rivalry in the AFC North. Bengals at the Cleveland Browns. Browns lost Deshaun Watson to an Achilles injury. I'm sure he's excited to finally be able to have a masseuse and physical trainer. Fans booed him before he went out on the field and then cheered him when he got hurt, which I don't like Deshaun Watson at all. I think he's not played well within his time in Cleveland, but that's still pretty crappy of fans to do. I don't think that that's cool. But
yeah, it's bad taste, and I get it. He's probably not the best of human beings, from what we know. But I feel like two wrongs don't make a right here. So you're kind of showing yourself as a not so good human being as well, cheering an injury. So glass houses and stones.
Well, it does mean we get to see what Jameis Crablegs Winston gets to do with this team. They ran out DTR first, and he didn't look good. And then they put Winston in, and Winston had his misses, but he did get two really nice passes in the red zone. One for a touchdown and another for a 2-point conversion. And it looks like they're moving on with Winston going forward, which I think is the right call with what they have. I'm excited for Tillman to finally be relevant, because he had a great game. And I think that he is probably the best wide receiver on this team now that they don't have Amari Cooper. So we'll see how that plays out. I also expect Njoku to be probably the leading reception guy there, the leading receiver from the tight end position.
Okay. Yeah, I could see it. And we'll see. Nick Chubb returned and scored in this game, so that was a big help as well. Nice to see after his knee went sideways last year. And in our bet news here, Alex, Higgins takes the lead over Pittman. So I don't know if he's going to look back at any point, but so far so good for this bet.
Yep, Pittman's playing injured.
Absolutely. And Higgins sat out 2 games to get fully healthy to come back and start being a world beater.
Yep, and Joe Burrow is playing out of his mind as well, versus the quarterback carousel that is Indianapolis.
Anything else on this matchup that we both got right? It was pretty easy.
Yeah, we both picked Cincinnati. Those were easy picks.
Cincinnati is going to be a team where you just pick now going forward, I have a feeling.
Or just pick against the Browns every week. Either or.
That too. But I feel really good about where the Bengals are at this exact moment.
I like the Bengals, but it's going to be tough when they play teams like, Kansas City or Baltimore or Buffalo. Those are going to be hard ones to necessarily pick Cincinnati.
We will see. Speaking of hard games, we have the next game here. It was the Lions at the Vikings, and I really thought I had this game on you, Alex, until the Vikings could not get a first down on their last drive of the game. If they would have iced the game and won the game. And if they had, I think Dan Campbell would be under fire for faking a punt in the first in his own territory. And it was not even a good fake. It was a fake that got sniffed out right away, and it wasn't pretty. And then the very next play, Aaron Jones ran for like a 40-yard touchdown. So Dan Campbell got off the hook from his bad coaching decisions in this game, and he was rescued because Goff was otherworldly again. He's now an MVP candidate. I think Darnold's still an MVP candidate, and I think that he was dealing in this game for the most part. And I think we saw David Montgomery get hurt. He returns, and then he fumbled and kind of got benched, and it turned into the Jahmyr Gibbs show towards the end. Alex, we have to talk about the milk carton right now, and on the side of the milk carton is Sam Laporta on that milk carton right now, like missing.
I just think he's probably playing through something. He's probably got an injury, or the defense is probably targeting him specifically to try to take him out, but with coverage, not a bounty gate thing. I think that he probably gets more targets next week with Jameson Williams out. So
I would hope so.
We'll see more of him then. They just have this thing about getting Khalif Raymond involved so much instead of actually getting it to Sam Laporta, who seems like he's a better talent. it is what it is. I'm definitely enjoying Jahmyr Gibbs having success, and he had a lot this week, so I appreciate that. Looks like an MVP candidate. It's going to be hard to beat Lamar Jackson at this point.
Josh Allen as well, with his 12 touchdowns and 0 interceptions so far on the season.
Mm-hmm. Well, Jared Goff just took out an undefeated team that you thought was going to win this game. That's with the coaching blunder and the fumble return for a touchdown, and it's without having Detroit's best defensive player for the rest of the year, who was arguably the best pass rusher in the league until he got hurt. Detroit showed a lot of grit to win this and then take the NFC North.
Absolutely, and they shouldn't look back going forward, but I got this one wrong, and you got this one right, Alex. Anything we missed on this one?
Yeah, I think Minnesota is going to stumble a little bit. I still think they're good enough to win the majority of the rest of their games, but I think that they're also not going to finish as a top team. They might max out at 10 or 11 wins, but that's just me. I don't know how you feel about that.
Hey, that's a heck of a year for Sam Darnold and J.J. McCarthy getting injured in preseason. Yeah, that's a heck of a year. Jay Hawkinson coming back from injury. I'm sure if you asked Kevin O'Connell that to start the year, if he would have took 10 or 11 wins, he'd be like, yep, sign me up.
Yeah, for sure.
Not everyone can be undefeated. Side joke here on your first standings prediction that we ever did. You're like, I have 4 teams that have one loss. So we all can't have those records, Alex.
Sure we can. It's possible. All right, let's move on to the Texans at the Packers. You went Packers. I went Texans. Texans seemed like they were going to win this game up until the end. Packers won on a last-minute field goal. Jeff, you took the victory. What did you notice about this game?
So, first thing, Stroud only had 86 passing yards, which is horrendous. So there's that. If you want to start looking at a place where to look for this game where it went wrong, that's one of them. But Mixon had his way rushing the ball, and he is a true bell cow, which he's already had one injury this year, so that does give me a little pause and a little bit of concern. So it's just they are relying on him very heavily right now. And also, I want to say that our Diggs and Collins bet that Diggs is 10 targets now ahead of Collins. We'll see if Collins can catch him in the next couple of weeks when he comes back.
I think he will.
You would double down on that bet right now.
Well, now it seems like Diggs is going to get 0 targets next week, and they're going to throw him all Tank Dell's way. So
how'd that work last week?
As far as the Texans go, Stroud was sacked 4 times, which was the most, or tied for the most so far this season. And the pressure rate was, I think it was like 42%, which was the most of the season. The Packers deployed a lot of switching defensive alignments at the last second, which threw off the Texans' offensive line and pass blocking schemes, which is something that Minnesota did earlier in the year. Green Bay copied some of those concepts. It was very effective. So there's a huge issue with the Texans and their blocking schemes. It's something Bobby Slowett has not done well in his time with the Texans. They can't seem to get the pass protections down. None of the offensive linemen know how to check. Stroud, I guess, is not recognizing it either. No one's really seeing some of these blitzes and where they're coming from. So if it's disguised, they're not going to stop it, which is very concerning. I think the Texans, they're still going to win their division. They're still going to make the playoffs. I don't know how successful they're going to be because they're going to come across teams that are going to do the same thing to them, and they don't appear to have an answer.
Yeah, I can see that as well. And I know we talked about this in the off season, but Bobby Slowett needed to come up with a second pitch in his year 2 with the Texans, and he has not done that just yet. And there's still some time to do it, so let's not write him off, but this could really affect him to get a job in this upcoming cycle.
Yeah, I don't anticipate him getting a head coaching job after this season. I think he probably stays with the Texans another year. But man, you then need to bring in a better offensive line coach to at least help alleviate some of these issues.
Alex, are you volunteering to be their new offensive line coach?
I could be their defensive end coach. I don't know about offensive line.
All right. Anything else to add to this game other than I was right and you were wrong?
You picked correctly. Jaden Reed, however, didn't do much this week, nor did Christian Watson. And the Texans were without 5 defensive starters, but were still able to contain the Packers to an extent, make Jordan Love turn over the ball twice. So it was a very competitive game.
Yeah, I think the Packers are going to the playoffs this year. I think we can pretty firmly say that now. Would you be on board with that yet?
I'm leaning that way, but with how tough that division is, it's gonna be a tight race.
Right now, all 4 make it to the playoffs as is.
That's possible. It's also possible that 2 NFC South teams make it as well.
Which 2 NFC South teams are you betting on there?
I'm still betting on the Falcons.
Okay.
Prior to the wide receiver injuries, I thought the Bucks might actually have won the division. They
would
might
agree.
still make the playoffs, but it'll be a little bit
That'll
tougher
be a
for
lot
them
harder.
now. Yeah. And the Saints still have an outside chance to make it as well.
Yeah, they got to get healthy, though, and kind of quick. I don't think they're making it with Spencer Rattler.
The NFC East has 3 teams that can make it. So basically everyone but the Giants can make it. And the NFC West, I still think almost any of them can make it at this point still.
It's a mess over there, though.
The NFC is much tougher than the AFC as far as depth this year. It's going to be really interesting how the next few weeks shake out.
Funny how that quickly changed, though, because it used to be that the NFC was disgusting. And
yeah, it seems like just 2 or 3 years ago, it was the NFC was the worst one.
That is why the NFL is the best league on the planet, because of the parity. And you could go from really bad to really good really quickly. Let's hope Panthers get there. But we can hop over to the Dolphins at the Colts. I got this one right also, Alex. You got this one wrong. Sorry. This is like a thing this week. And Colts went in spite of Anthony Richardson, who threw for 129 yards with a 41.7% completion percentage. Dolphins, not much to take away from this game other than Achane is back and Tua will be back next week. But Colts are in some pretty desperate waters right now, in my opinion.
Well, again, I think I had the right idea on this one. It just didn't work out the way I thought it would. You picked correctly. Miami couldn't get anything really going at the end of the game, but they were winning 10-3 at halftime. They were still tied 10-10 at the end of the third quarter. Miami just couldn't do anything that second half offensively. I don't know how that could be the case with having Tyreek Hill and Devon Achane and Mostert and Waddle and now Jonnu Smith, who appears to be the number 1 target. So give me some credit for Jonnu Smith actually being used in this offense.
I will if we had that crystal ball and knew that Tyler Huntley, who used Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely, was coming to the team and playing.
Well, I mean,
I've been right there with you.
When Tua was healthy, Jonnu was still new to the team, and now Jonnu's been out there. But it is questionable that he's behind Waddle, or that he's in front of Waddle and Hill both in the target share. That's very weird to me, but
it's because Snoop's not that good.
Yeah, and I agree with you there. He's a very middling player who can only be successful on a much better team. I do think that. What now? Yeah, he is a Pro Bowler with Baltimore. On a loaded Baltimore team, he was a Pro Bowler. But I think both these teams are pretty flawed right now, and I don't think either one makes the playoffs. And even if Tua plays the entire rest of the season, it's going to be hard for Miami to make it now. The Colts are just too up and down with Anthony Richardson. It's going to be a roller coaster. And then even with Flacco, I'm not sure that there's enough juice for them to actually make the playoffs. It seems like the roster, it feels a little bit worse than last year, or last year was a little bit easier of a schedule.
Could be both, but you remember correctly that Joe Flacco was the quarterback there. Or not Flacco. Minshew. So, you know that guy that you say is really bad?
Yep. I think he's, okay, I wouldn't say really bad, but on a team like the Raiders, he's really bad. On a team like the Indianapolis, he's almost good, but not quite there. I think Joe Flacco is a better quarterback who can play in more systems than Minshew, but I think Shane Steichen's system suits Minshew the most of all the systems Minshew's played in.
Okay, I can agree with that.
And I'm not ready to give up on Anthony Richardson as far as his NFL career. It's hard to play him in fantasy right now, and that's for sure. And that's not something most people thought that they would be saying, at least fantasy-wise. So play him at your own risk. I know I actually benched him in favor of Drake May for this week, and that worked out for me, even though Richardson got a win and May didn't.
Him.
Huh?
Who could have told you not to draft him? Who could have told you to stay away? Man, I wish there was a fantasy expert out there that actually knew what they're talking about.
Jeff is just bitter that the Panthers didn't get Anthony Richardson because they would actually have more wins with Anthony Richardson at the helm.
Probably.
They actually probably would, but it wouldn't have looked any prettier, that's for sure.
No, Bryce is done, and he could be dealt this week as well, so that's an interesting little tidbit.
Where do you think Bryce could go, realistically?
I could see the Dolphins being incentivized to snag him now, especially now that Tua's back. Now you're not in that desperation spot, and they know Huntley's not it. So they have a little bit of desperation smell to them, in my opinion.
I think the Dolphins are probably the best spot for Bryce Young to go to.
Mike McDaniel is a quarterback whisperer.
Well, I think he's very similar to Tua. So if something happens to Tua, it would be nice to have a young, recently highly drafted quarterback who also played for the same school as Tua to be able to keep things going. And he has a chance to be better there with the weapons that Miami has. And it's going to be hard for Miami to draft a quarterback. So they might as well trade for a young guy and see if they can fix him.
Yeah, I don't disagree there. All right, Alex, we have some sombering news here. We both got this next game wrong. It's the Eagles at the Giants. Giants are bad, but the Eagles proved that they were mentally tough in this game, and they pulled out the victory. What we didn't factor in last week is this is the Saquon Barkley revenge game, and he went for 176 rushing yards in this game. Here's some alarming stuff that's coming up. Jalen Hurts only had 114 yards passing. They won the game. But we just went over Stroud having 86 yards, so there is something going on in the NFL right now. And then Daniel Jones was benched for Drew Lock, and this may not be the last time this happens this year because there is an injury guarantee where if Daniel Jones does get hurt, he is guaranteed $23 million next year. So we could really see Daniel Jones benched because of money.
Yeah, potentially. I will say also that the Eagles had A.J. Brown back, which helped them a lot. And Giants, despite having Neighbors back, couldn't really get anything going on offense at all. There's not much to add about this one. I think we both acknowledge that the Eagles overall are struggling compared to what they should be, but the Giants they're not good, and they're going to be a team that we're going to be picking against a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a little surprising considering how they were a few weeks ago. And this does not look like that team anymore that dominated the time of possession in a game or two.
Okay. We both also got the next one wrong as well. We both went Atlanta over Seattle. Atlanta was playing at home, Seattle playing on the road, crossing the entire country. A little bit of a shocker for both of us that Seattle dominated this game and never felt close, and they finished 20 points ahead. Do you think the Falcons are switching to Michael Penix permanently, or do you think this was the game's out of hand, let's get Penix some NFL experience at the end? That one for me, because I don't see how you would be comfortable paying Kirk Cousins $150 million for 7 games. But I mean, that's never a good thing when you get to the point where you take your quarterback out of the game. But I think it was the shocker of the week. Seattle went over, shows some mental toughness because this is a 10 a.m. body clock time for Seattle. So they played at 1 o'clock. But Geno looked good, and another thing that I noticed in this game was Bijan Robinson took over the running back 1 role for the Falcons finally, but it's in a loss. So will we see them regress and revert to incorporating Tyler Algier in more? I think that they should have Bijan at like 20 rushes. They probably gave him 1 rush too many, maybe. I would like to see Algier get involved more than that, more than just 5 rushes. I don't want him to threaten Bijan for the number 1 role, but I want Bijan to be fresh and be able to slice and dice and be involved more in the pass game too. But this was not a good game for the Falcons. Definitely a game to forget.
Yeah, and hopefully they have very short-term memories and they'll be able to move on to the next game relatively soon. Great. Anything else on this shocking game of the week?
No, let's move on to a matchup that was the opposite of shocking, and that is Tennessee Titans at the Buffalo Bills. Both of us picked Buffalo. Tennessee kind of had a little bit of a surprise at the beginning of the game where they were beating Buffalo, but Buffalo ended up demolishing them in the second half. So what did you make of this, Jeff?
So they were up 10-0, I believe, to start the game, which is a theme considering the Patriots were up 10-0 as well. Levis didn't play, so that's something we didn't know going into last week. Mason Rudolph did. But this game went exactly how we said it would. It was a get Cooper comfortable game, and that was not that easy to say, but I said it without a stutter there. And then we had Ray Davis's role continues to grow. I know this one, a lot of it was in junk time, but man, he's putting some good tape out there. So eventually they're not going to have any choice but to keep putting him out there. And also, as I mentioned earlier, Josh Allen, 12 touchdowns on the year. 0 interceptions, which he's not a 0 interception guy. So
He's usually leading the league in interceptions, pretty much.
it's very surprising. If he ends up with 30 touchdowns and zero interceptions, like, I don't know how that's not an MVP year, but we'll see.
I liked how Keon Coleman took a couple short passes, really almost the distance for a couple touchdowns.
He's good. He's electric.
He was just shy of getting probably 2 touchdowns in this game. It's nice to see him get involved more with Khalil Shakir back, Amari Cooper there. It looked much better on offense for them, granted against the Titans, but spreading the ball out, Josh Allen able to call his shots. I guess when you don't have someone like Diggs there, you don't feel the need to force feed the ball in one direction, and you're probably going to get less interceptions that way. But 0 7 weeks in is shocking compared to what we know about the gunslinger that is Josh Allen.
Yeah, I'm impressed. Anything else to add to this game before we go to a game where I don't even want to talk about?
Tony Pollard is the only startable player for Tennessee. That's pretty much it.
Okay, that's fair. That is fair. All right, speaking of that next game, I'm going to let you break it down because I don't want to even talk about it. It's the Panthers at the Commanders.
For the lulz, I picked the Carolina Panthers to win this game. Kind of felt like Washington got beat up the week before against the Ravens, and I felt like they were primed for an upset. And if Carolina's going to get a win, I thought it would be potentially this week. Carolina was given the favor of Jaden Daniels getting hurt in this game, and it didn't slow Washington one bit. So Carolina got blown out 40-7, and I think this has cemented, in my mind, Carolina being the worst team this year. They've dealt with a lot of defensive injuries. Basically, most of their starting defensive group were either traded or hurt. I know they made a lot of moves signing defensive guys off practice squad recently to kind of offset some of that, but it's not looking good for your Carolina Panthers, and it's getting to the point now where they're probably going to sell guys off and try to build up some draft capital to restock the team.
Push them away. It's time. It's time to go in a different direction. But I will say that even though the Panthers are bad, I think that no matter what happens this season, Dave Canales is going to have a shot to remake and redo this roster because they literally can't lose another coach this year.
Well, positives are Jatavian Sanders looks good, and Chuba Hubbard still looks good. They might be able to sell Chuba Hubbard to somebody.
I would do that.
Who needs running back depth. But
that gives Jonathan Brooks half.
He should be coming back. And positive news on the Washington side is I know how much you love Brian Robinson Jr., and he put the team on his back, I felt like, in some regards.
Back from his injury.
So, he looked really good. Eckler didn't do much this week. Terry McLaurin, he really didn't do much I felt like he didn't do much early, but he picked up steam as the game went on. I'm just shocked that Marcus Mariota was so effective in this game.
It's the Panthers. They're playing the C squad by now. But I got this one right, and you got this one wrong.
Yep. The Panthers held Jaden Daniels to 2 completions for 6 yards and made him run 3 times for 50 yards. So they were doing an okay job against the actual really good quarterback and then lost it when Marcus Mariota came out.
Absolutely. All right, Alex. We got a few more games to go over here, and we'll do the Raiders at the Rams next. We both picked the Rams. We both got this one right. Kupp did not return in this game like we thought he would. Kyron Williams kind of carried this team, but at 2-4, they are 1.5 games back, and they will very soon have Puka back, probably Tyler Higbee, and we'll see what happens with Cooper Kupp, as we had mentioned earlier. From the Raiders' perspective, Aiden O'Connell broke his throwing thumb, so he's going to be out 4 to probably 6 weeks. I think probably longer, because you could think that throwing thumb would be a hard one for it to heal. And then Brock Bowers and Alexander Madison are bright spots for the Raiders right now, so they do have a run game with Madison that they didn't have with Zamir White. Anything else you noticed from this game?
I don't think Gardner Minshew will start the entire rest of the season. I think there's a good chance that they could try to start Ritter, which would not be great either. They got 5 freaking field goals. They couldn't get any touchdowns. And O'Connell broke his thumb. He was looking okay before he broke his thumb. And Antonio Pierce, I've definitely soured on each game. I feel like I sour on him more. They had the inexcusable kick a field goal with like 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Fourth and 9. And they were down 8 points. Yeah, they're down 8 points and needed to score a touchdown and go for a 2-point conversion. and he kicked a field goal and had terrible game management, and the Rams won. I think the Rams probably would have won regardless, but it felt like he didn't even try for the aggressive victory. He talks every week about how tough they need to play, and he does like the softest decisions in crunch time. I'm officially off the Antonio Pierce train. It's been a week-by-week case because I keep expecting him to get better, and each week I feel like it gets worse.
I'm going to take a celebration for this one because I told you it was the worst hire in the history of coaching hires. Urban Meyer bad.
Well, I don't know about Urban Meyer bad. He's not going around trying to hook up with people at a bar. I feel like he deserved a chance after last year, and I didn't feel like the Raiders were going to be able to get a high quality candidate. So I felt like there's no sense in them not trying to go with Antonio Pierce, but he just hasn't improved. He just, beyond stagnation, he's gotten worse. Like he hasn't even stayed the same as last year. He's just gotten worse.
No, he's not a very good head coach.
All right. Yeah. So we've got the Kansas City Chiefs at the 49ers. We both went KC. KC won. We were both right about that. And obviously, we've talked about all the injuries that San Francisco has suffered. And we've talked in previous episodes about, Christian McCaffrey and all the other things that they've gone through. Not a fun year for San Francisco. And KC is now the only undefeated team 7 weeks in. Jeff, what did you make out of this game?
So, unlike Josh Allen, Mahomes has thrown 6 touchdown passes and 8 interceptions through 7 games, which less than 1 touchdown per week and more than 1 interception per week. I would say that's not his best year yet. Purdy throws for 3 interceptions in this game. He has 7 on the year. We're entering a spot right now where things aren't going to be perfect for Purdy. Offensive line hasn't been as good. Mason's been banged up. McCaffrey's out. Debo has pneumonia. Ayuk tears his ACL. This right here, this stretch of 10 football games is where Brock Purdy earns his next contract. Is he going to be able to pull a team that isn't perfect along the way? Or is he going to falter and just show how mid that he actually is? So, thoughts on Brock Purdy before I move over to one of my questions?
I think that Brock Purdy is going to be fine. To me, it's not the supporting cast that makes or breaks Brock Purdy. It's actually whether it's man or zone coverage. He struggles more against man coverage than zone coverage. So I think that's a big factor. And Kansas City is one of the teams that has the highest level of man coverage at this point. And they have really sticky defenders. They're just going to outmatch them that way. Right now, Spagnuolo and the way that defense is set up is the perfect counter to a Kyle Shanahan offense. That's just what it is, in my opinion.
Yeah. How do you feel that San Francisco's year has went so far now that they are a 3-4 football team and they've lost Ayuk now? I know they got Pearsall back. Who knows when we'll see Debo Samuel back? He was in very bad shape this week, had to go to the hospital for several days with pneumonia. Christian McCaffrey is supposed to come back in the next 2 to 3 weeks, but we'll see with that. Like, how do you feel about the trajectory of this team now?
I think if they just hang on and win enough games to stumble into the playoffs, I think that they'll still be very competitive in the playoffs and still have a chance to make it to the Super Bowl. Despite everything that they've gone through, I still think that they have a good chance to get close to the Super Bowl.
Do you think Purdy is close to that $50 to $60 million quarterback, or do you think this year is hurting him for that path?
If Dak Prescott is worth 60, surely Purdy is worth 50.
But that means he has to give up some toys around him, so we'll see what that means for him going forward. Dak already gave up all his toys to get his contract.
Well, Ayuk is already paid. Pearsall is under contract for the next, basically, 5 years plus 2 franchise tags. Jawan Jennings was already re-signed. So potentially they lose Debo, but I want to say they still have him for another year, if my memory serves me correct.
Yeah. But that might mean they can't re-sign Debo or Christian McCaffrey. And I think Christian McCaffrey is like a 1 in a million running back. Like, I don't think you can duplicate what he does. And I don't know if we'll ever see it in our lifetime again. So be interesting. Last question. I have one question for you. How will the Hunt and Pacheco backfield look like when Pacheco returns? Do you think Hunt keeps a certain percentage of this?
Pacheco would be the primary guy, and Hunt would spell him, but it's probably between the two of them, I'd probably say 55 Pacheco, 45 Hunt, maybe 60 Pacheco, 40 Hunt, which is still a good amount of Hunt.
Yeah, it's not what you drafted Pacheco at, is kind of what I was getting at here. So he's a guy that if you could still trade him for 80 cents on the dollar, I probably would trade him right now.
Yeah. All right, Jeffrey, let's move on to the Jets at the Steelers. You get to take a double victory lap here because you picked Pittsburgh, I picked the Jets. Pittsburgh won, but not only did Pittsburgh win, you've been a stout defender of Mr. Russell Wilson. He got his first start with the Steelers. Jeff, why don't you tell us how he did?
Oh man, I'm grinning over here like a Cheshire cat. So Russ looked great returning to the field. He got George Pickens the ball, which, spoiler alert, if you get your number one receiver and weapon involved in a game, you might actually do quite well. But when they're stretching the field, it makes it so much easier for Harris and Warren to run the ball. Harris went over the century mark with 102 yards. Pickens ended up with 5 catches, 111 yards, and a touchdown. I have a question about him after this, but I want to say that on the opposite side, Adams, being reunited with Aaron Rodgers, goes 3 for 30 in his debut. And this season for New York is almost over. 2-5, they're going to have a hard time making the playoffs in the AFC. But do you believe that George Pickens is a wide receiver 1 for the rest of the year?
Do I think he's a wide receiver 1? No, I would say wide receiver 2. Okay. But all you got to do is just throw it in his general direction. I think with Russ, sometimes I feel like he just closes his eyes and hopes for the best. And with Fields, I feel like he waits and waits to see it before he throws it. So just two completely different approaches. And it certainly worked for the Steelers in this game. Pickens had probably the catch of the year in that game where he just bounced around and he still snatched it and ran.
You see that one throw and catch from Russ, Pat Fryermuth as well, that Russ led him perfectly.
Yeah, Russ also had a tight window throw earlier to Pickens as well. I think it was an over-the-shoulder throw, where it was a really good spot. And even throwing behind him, I don't know if it was intentionally there or not, but he was able to get it to a spot where Pickens could turn around and snatch it before the defender could get there. I mean, Russ obviously had to shake off some rust at the beginning of the game, but as the game kept going, he looked better, and the Steelers' offense exploded. It looks like Russ is probably going to keep it for the next couple weeks, at least, barring, anything crazy happening. I do think that they're going to find ways to mix Fields onto the field, probably some interesting trick plays or whatever, maybe using like a Taysom Hill in some regards. But
like a Carson Wentz.
They're in a good situation to have because having either one of those guys as your backup is still better than probably anyone else's backup situation.
No, I don't disagree there, but Steelers are actually a little bit scary. Imagine if they ended up with Cooper Kupp as well. This team would immediately turn into one of the best teams in the AFC and a potential threat for every team that they play.
Cooper Kupp would actually be a really good compliment to Pickens because he'd be a more possessional guy. I know they have Roman Wilson. Roman Wilson has been trying to work his way onto the field. He's been struggling with injuries. He's also a rookie. Tomlin's pretty hard on some rookies. We'll see if he can break out. I really like Roman Wilson.
I'm cutting
There's
out
too
that
many
clip.
Wilsons that start with an R, but Wilson
I'm
Wilson
cutting
would
out
be
that
interesting.
clip.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm going to edit it out, so good luck, Jeff. I really like Roman Wilson as a prospect. I'd really like to see him succeed. Get it together, Jeff. Get it together, sir. But yeah, I think Jets are a dumpster fire. I still think that with the way their schedule is, they can still stumble into the playoffs with like a 9-8 record. To be ridiculous, but it's possible.
Let's be honest. At this point, we don't want to see Aaron Rodgers succeed. We want to watch him implode, right?
Yep, I agree.
What better way than to lose to the Patriots next week?
I want his career to go exactly the way that Brett Favre's did. I want him to have a 9-8 year with the Jets. I want him to have some kind of scandal, and I want him to get traded to the Vikings. That's what I want. And then be taken out by the Saints, just the same way. Be complete parody.
So he'll be a Viking with J.J. McCarthy?
Yeah.
And then Darnold will go back to the Jets?
Yeah, that would be funny.
All right.
He is 12 years younger than Rodgers. He rehabbed his career, proved it wasn't him.
Exactly. Gino had another shot in New York with the Giants, so it does happen. Not with the Jets, with the Jets. So maybe he'll go to the Giants. Oh, Sam Darnold to the Giants. You heard it here first.
All right, let's finish up this episode.
2 Monday night games.
Yeah.
First one was great. Second one was not so great. But I'll let you get kicked off with the first one here, Alex.
Ravens at the Buccaneers. I felt like it was a little bit close in the first half. Again, another 10-0 start for another team that ended up losing. I picked Baltimore, you picked Tampa. Baltimore won 41-31. It was kind of Baltimore dominated the second and third quarters. Tampa was winning the first quarter, did nothing in the middle, and then tried to come back desperately in the fourth quarter. Seemed like they were close to it, but they had Mike Evans, who played through a hamstring injury and aggravated it during this game. Went out, came back in later, and then went out again. Godwin was on his way to having a decent game and dislocated his ankle. Tampa got all the running backs involved, and I feel like Rashad Bateman probably had a career game on the Ravens side. Henry finished strong, almost had like a 90-something yard touchdown run, but got downed. And Lamar Jackson had 5 touchdowns and 0 interceptions, and looks like the leading MVP candidate.
He's definitely one of them. His running mate right next to him, Derrick Henry, he also had a pretty big game with a receiving touchdown. So all interesting aspects there. You got this one right. I got this one wrong. I thought Tampa Bay was going to win this game, and they might have if Mike Evans and Chris Godwin were 100% for this game. I know Chris Godwin didn't go out till like less than a minute left in the game, but Mike Evans was never 100% in this game, and he did drop a touchdown where he got hurt. So different game if that gets caught.
I hear about the Scooby-Doo me. They would have won this game if it wasn't for those pesky Ravens.
Hey, you Scooby-Doo me all the time.
I don't know what that means, but we're cutting that out.
Well, we do whatever you do whatever you just said. Your incorrect picks. Better?
Sure. Anyway,
my thought process was right, but the result was wrong. That is
the Panthers one was the wild reach on my side, but Miami and Indianapolis was 50-50. I felt like Miami had a chance to win, and they were very competitive, and they just lost it at the end. I don't regret picking Miami. That was a coin toss game.
Exactly.
I don't regret picking Arizona over the Chargers. I also thought this was a coin toss game, and I felt like Arizona had a chance to win. We always talk about them being a team that could upset another team trying to make the playoffs. Have been pretty consistent. I think the Chargers are a middle of the road team, and they lost to Arizona. So I got this one right. You got this one wrong. Unfortunately, Jeff, there's not much for me to break down on this one. You can break down the game if you want.
A lot of field goals. So that'll be the first thing that I say there. A lot of field goals. James Conner looked good. Cardinals win with Murray's long rushing touchdown. And the Chargers had to pass the ball in this game because the Cardinals did not let them run the ball in this game. So season high passing yards for Justin Herbert, and Justin Herbert is getting much closer to that 4,200 yard pace that I'd given you earlier. He is currently at 3,298 pace right now, but he was much lower the last few weeks.
Well, as long as their run game gets shut down, they're going to be forced to pass. They don't have the wide receiver core to be successful. So
Agreed.
even though Herbert threw for almost 350 yards, they still lost the game. He had no touchdowns out of it. So that's the issue with how the Chargers are constructed. They need, in my opinion, a better running back. They need another wide receiver added to that group. They need a few more pieces on defense. They probably need another offensive lineman starter. And, the Cardinals, they're not in a better situation. They've got a lot of flaws on that team, too. The only thing that they've got going better for them is pretty much the opposite positions. They have the better running back. They have the better receiver core, but they have a lot more holes on defense than the Chargers do. And their quarterback's not as good as the Chargers.
That is very true. I will not argue with that. I'm a big Herbert believer, and I will continue to be.
Well, that does it for this episode of the Never Too Early Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you all for downloading and listening to this episode, and please don't forget to like and subscribe. Please leave us a comment and share the show. Every little bit helps.
You can find us on all podcasting apps by searching N2E Fantasy, and with our handle at N2E Fantasy on all social media platforms. Please join our community and give us a follow. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and remember, it's truly never too early for fantasy football. Thank you again.
Bye, everybody.